So what kind of batteries do you recommend for our cameras? What, I mean, is there, I know you don't represent any battery company in specific, but what do you recommend guys run? What kind of batteries?
If I'm running standard double A's, it's just going to be, any alkaline battery. And that's specific for me up in the north. With how cold it gets, sometimes lithiums don't last quite as long. Down in your southern states, Texas, Alabama, Florida, you probably can run those lithiums with a lot more success, and they'll probably last quite a bit longer than the alkaline. But really, it's going to come down to what works best for you and your situation. And, like I said, both of them are going to last a pretty significant amount of time with the right settings that you put on the camera, and just making sure they're all the same is going to be the biggest tip there.
Yeah. So that's a good tip too. I did not realize that lithium doesn't do as good in cold weather and alkaline does better. That's good. I did not know that. We do some retreats in Ohio, and maybe we need to start using alkaline batteries up there. Good point. All right, let's talk about cards. When I go run cameras, I carry a backpack, and I got batteries, and I got a whole Ziploc bag full of cards. I have learned that Covert, it likes some types of cards better than others. Can you tell us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we do offer SD cards for Covert that we know for a fact are going to work with all of our cameras. If you're going to buy over-the-counter cards, the biggest thing to look for on the package there is the Class 10 label. That's a specific type of SD card that's going to function at the right speed to work with these cameras. Some of the higher end action camera and big video camera SD cards are going to cause some issues for the cell cameras specifically. Sometimes it'll work if you format the card with those higher speed SD cards, but it's really not recommended. We see that cause a lot more issues for the user than just about anything else. Another thing is really to check the package of the camera itself and see recommended storage sizes. We don't recommend anything less, we don't recommend anything less than a 16 gigabyte SD card. For the longest time, they sold 4 and 8 gigabyte cards, but as the technology has advanced, we've found that these larger storage cards work a lot better with the cameras. And then with our cameras specifically, we do list maximum storage size as well. On the cameras that you have there, that's going to be 32 gigabytes. As we progress into the future, that's going to increase to 64, 128. And just to be mindful of that, because again, if you have a card that's too large for the camera, you can plug it in there and you're going to have issues again.
So even though it's transmitting the pictures, I mean, the card can get full, correct?
It can. Something to look for on cameras, on ours, it's called the overwrite feature, where if for some reason your card were to get full, it's just going to erase the oldest picture on the card to take a new one. So that way it's never going to stop taking images. It's not going to stop sending to the app. If you don't have that feature turned on and you've left the camera for a long time and the card does get full, that's when the camera will stop taking images.
Gotcha. Is it helpful to reformat the card every time? Every time I go check the camera or move the camera, should I be reformatting the card?
So anytime I put a new SD card into the camera, I make sure to format it to that unit specifically. The thing to be careful with is if you do format the card, it's going to delete all the images on there. So if I'm going to move a camera or switch out cards, I always make sure to download whatever images I want. If there's a bunch of pictures of squirrels or whatever, get rid of those, keep whatever pictures you want. And then once you put it back in there, you can reformat at that point. I just always try to remind people that it's very important to format your cards, and it's something that you should do as often as possible. Just make sure to pull whatever images off the card you want before that, so that you can keep them saved on whatever device.
Now, do you recommend, because I can format the card in my computer or I can format the card in the camera, right? Which one do you recommend?
I tend to recommend doing it in the camera because then it's going to format specifically to that device. it tends to work if you do it from your laptop, but if for some reason the settings are set up wrong with your system, it's going to end up corrupting that card for the camera.
Gotcha. Let's talk about places to put the camera and the best, setup. I learned very quickly that I had to turn the notifications off on my phone from the Covert app, because if I put it on a feeder and I got raccoons and stuff coming in there all night long, I mean, it'll keep you up all night long if you got your notifications turned on. What are some great places to put your cell camera, and maybe some places where we shouldn't put a cell camera?
So, I mean, places that you wouldn't put a camera are harder to say. It's just going to depend on your property and where you're, historically have seen game move, or if there's places that you want to find. Maybe you've never had a camera there and just want to see what's going on. I know personally, when I go on scout a property, obviously there's going to be your standard places like a food plot or a feeder. But if you find a heavily used game trail and want to monitor that, the recommendation from me would always be to face it down the trail. If you face it, the trail runs this way and you've got the camera facing at a section of it, you're going to miss a ton of action that happens around there. And by facing it down the trail, you also might get multiple pictures of a buck, or as it's traveling up, if a deer split off behind it before it came to that camera, you'll never know. By facing it down that trail, you'll get as much intel as you can in that situation. And then, if you're setting it on a food plot or a scrape or really wherever, just trying to clear as much brush as possible from that main field of view to minimize the amount of, false pictures that you're getting, brush in the way of the game, all those types of things that don't make the educational experience of trail cameras as good as it can be. Just doing things to minimize any issues that could arise from false triggers, because the last thing anybody wants is a picture of the grass. We want pictures
just blowing in the wind. Yeah. What about on a food plot? Let's say you got a 3/4 acre food plot, and these things, I mean, they trigger pretty far, but it's not gonna trigger all the way on the other side of the food plot. Is there a way, or do you recommend mounting cameras up high? And is there a way to get them to just take a picture on a some sort of interval?
Yeah, so on a larger food plot like that, one of the better ways to monitor it is going to be figuring out their access points. Just because you could have it over on the far edge of the food plot. Well, if they're accessing on the other side, you might miss a lot of pictures there. So determining those is going to be a big thing. And then, with Covert specifically, we do offer a time-lapse feature, which you can set certain times of the day and it can take a picture for whatever interval you set. So let's say you wanted to see first thing in the morning and first thing at night, you could set a time lapse from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then we'll say 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and it could take a picture every 5 minutes just to see if things are moving across that food plot, or if there's areas that may be out of range for the camera, but there could still be game that are within range of making a shot while hunting. So there are ways to monitor areas like that. But again, with that time lapse feature, it's going to be something that could potentially run through batteries. So making sure to set it either only for specific times or running with one of those external power sources, batteries or solar panel.
Yeah, I think that's a feature that I need to get more familiar with, and I need to use it, because I think we're missing game because we're only taking a picture of the feeder that's sitting on the edge of the food plot, or we're only taking a picture of one side of the food plot. I think if we could get them up higher and get them on a time lapse, I think we would actually see that there's a lot more deer or more animals using that food plot at various times of the day than what we're seeing in that because I mean, a big buck, he may not come to that feeder, but he might be standing down there on the edge of the food plot on the back corner that you can't see from where the feeder is, but the natural tendency is to, of course, stick it right on the feeder. But I've also learned, to carry around some T-post and just don't be afraid to, even though there's not a tree right there that I can mount the camera on, don't be afraid to stick up a T-post and, stick a T-post in the ground and put a camera on it that way. And I know y'all probably sell some aftermarket stuff too that to mount the cameras on something. But a lot of times there's not a good tree to put the camera on, so carry a T-post with you.
Yep. You know, we actually did launch, it would have been 2021 now, we launched a specific mount for T-posts for that situation specifically. If there's large fields or, you know, places out west like Nebraska that's a big grassland, you might not have a tree to put it up on. So utilizing those T-posts could, you know, get you to be able to scout areas that you might not otherwise be able to mount a camera.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good to know. I didn't know y'all had a T-post mount. That means I don't have to take the strap and tie it around 25 times to get it to go on the T-post. And even then, you know, the pictures are like at an angle because I didn't get it straight on there. What about the software or the hardware or the firmware, whatever you call it, on the camera itself? Do I need to be updating this? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's always good to, you know, check, especially if you just added a new camera to your account within either the web portal or the app. There is an area to check, you know, if that update firmware button's red and it's lit up, click it, make sure it's got the latest firmware. Just because, you know, with any technology, whether it's your cell phone or your cell camera, there's going to be continual testing done. And, you know, we might find a bug with a very specific settings combination. And we put those new firmware updates out to, you know, to fix that, to fix any issues that have been found throughout the process of testing. Going forward for Covert, it is going to be something that we do automatically. The system will check to make sure that there's enough battery life and SD card space to support an update. So that way the consumer doesn't have to, you know, be checking that, or if they miss it, they have issues. We should be able to at least help with that some. But it's definitely something, you know, if you take your cameras out of the woods for the winter time and you're going to put them back out in the spring, when you turn them back on, just make sure to check for that, because we're just trying to give you the best product that we can, and those firmware updates will help with that.
Sometimes I've had to call technical support for, you know, for Covert, and again, I love it. It's been really good experience. You're talking to somebody in Kentucky and they'll say, well, you know, do you have the camera with you? And so I know that's important, because most of the time I've been able to get good luck. If I have the camera with me, I can call Covert on the phone and I can say, they'll tell me to, you know, turn it off, wait 5 minutes, and then turn it back on. And they're doing something on the back end to fix the camera. I know that's not always possible, but I want to encourage folks, if you're having problems with your camera, go get it, bring it out of the woods, and then call Covert technical support, because you guys can fix a lot of those things remotely, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely helpful to be able to have kind of a real-time discussion about what the issue is with the camera, because, you know, to say, you know, for example, my camera stopped sending pictures. Well, that could be a multitude of different things that cause that. So to actually have that unit in hand, you know, we do have a great team down in Kentucky to help people out via the phone as well as via our chat system, and usually they can get to the bottom of it relatively quickly.
Yeah. So let's say I've got these cameras and, you know, I think I'm paying $7 or $8 a month, something like that, for a certain number of pictures. And I'm doing all that through the app, right? A lot of guys have questions. Well, how do you see the pictures? Well, you go to the Covert app that you download on your phone, and I can actually see all my cameras, and I can scroll through them and look at them and click on them, see which ones have new pictures and which ones don't. I can see the battery life. I can see the strength of the cell signal. A lot of great things that I can see remotely. Let's say deer season went out and I don't want to pay, you know, for this camera, and this camera. You know, how do I turn those cameras off for a certain period of time? And then maybe next fall, or really probably July 4th, I'm going to be putting them out again to try to get some bucks, you know, that are growing their antlers. How do I, you know, turn them off and turn them on in terms of the billing stuff?
So there's the main way to go about it is to go to our billing website, secure-covertwireless.com. Once you log into your account, you'll see all your cameras listed there. That's going to be listed based on the IMEI number. You can find that on a sticker on the inside of the camera door. Sometimes it's on the side, but also within the Covert app. Once you go to that camera settings, it's listed right there. If you want to get rid of the camera completely for some reason, there is a way to just take it off of your account. If you just want to stop paying for it for the off season or forever, for whatever amount of time, where it says active next to the camera, if you click that, it'll go into a suspended mode. So the camera won't send pictures to the app, but it also won't be on your invoice until you reactivate that camera. If you have any questions, that's again something that our team can help you with, but it can all be done via your billing account.
Yeah, that's really helpful because, nobody wants to, the wife, she'll complain about, well, what is this bill right here? Oh, okay, well, I'll turn those off when it's not deer season, but that's helpful. So are there other do's and don'ts for cellular trail cameras? I know that I've kind of gone through the questions that I had. Are there other things that you see guys doing frequently that you'd like to mention, do this or don't do that?
One of the big things that I always recommend is to make sure you're facing your camera either north or south. If you face it directly east or west, whether it's sunrise or sunset, you're going to tend to get a ton of pictures at those times, because the way these cameras are being triggered is with both movement and with heat. So adding that heat portion is really to help eliminate some of those false triggers in the wintertime or even in the summertime. It's looking for that difference in temperature, what a deer would normally be at. Well, if you face it directly east or west and there isn't, a thick forest or a big hill in the way, that sun's going to heat up that sensor. And then so any movement that goes in front of that camera is going to trigger an image, where if it's facing north or south at those times, you may be able to avoid that.
Interesting. That, that kind of triggers a thought too. Does weather affect how quickly I get the picture to my phone?
That's hard to say. I'm sure in super heavy rainstorms or super heavy snowfalls that there may be a decrease in cell signal across the board. But we haven't noticed anything extreme enough to be able to recommend or really give any detail about that. That might be something for us to look into in the future, but as we sit here today, we don't have any extreme cases of that. I mean, obviously, if a tornado rips your camera off the tree, well then, okay. But I think in most situations, the cell strength is going to stay pretty consistent.
Yeah. I have noticed sometimes there could be a delay. My son went turkey hunting the other day, and I have a picture on that path that he has to go down. And I didn't get a picture of him, that day, but then the next day it showed up on my app, so I don't know if that was maybe a cell service reception thing, or maybe it was waiting to that once a day when it uploads.
So we have seen that sometimes, it's not a constant, the cell signal, it's going to come on different wavelengths and whatever else. And if for some reason it's caught in a low point, that camera is going to attempt to send it. If it fails, it'll attempt to send it again. We have it capped at a certain number of failures, so it doesn't burn that battery life down, but it's going to keep that image in the queue. So maybe the next time, for example, the daily check-in, or if there's a strong signal and another picture gets sent through, it might be dragged through at that point. But we do have it set up to try and limit the amount of attempts an image goes through, so you're not killing your batteries.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That it would just send it at a different time, when there's a stronger signal. I didn't know it did that. That's cool. What's new for Covert? What's coming out in the future? Like, what can we be looking for on the horizon? I mean, the technology just keeps getting better and better. The price seems to keep coming down, which in this world, with the inflation, that's surprising. Everything else, the price is going up, but man, what's coming on the horizon for cellular trail cameras?
Yep. So this year we've got the WC32 built off that same WC30 platform, but with a bigger emphasis on the actual in-app photo quality. So we increased by about 40% the image quality that you see on the app, even before the HQ download, so that you can have a much higher quality image when you're zooming in. And that's been a big focus for us as we progress into the future. We've got a few new projects that we're pretty excited about that will be, coming on the horizon, with a big emphasis on some of the things we've talked today, with cell strength as well as image quality. Those are kind of the big focuses that Covert's had for a long time. And so as this technology improves and becomes more cost effective, it's still something that's kind of at the forefront of our focus.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Lucas, I want to thank you for your time today, man. You've been a wealth of information, and it's one thing for me to get on here and say, well, this is what I think about cell cameras, but I really like to hear it from an expert who's working in that field day to day. You are much more in tune with the technology than I am, and I really appreciate you coming on here with me today.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you again for having us and being such a big supporter of Coverts. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll keep singing the praises. And the guys who come on our retreats, you know, we show them pictures of big deer, and always, without fail, they ask, what kind of cameras are you guys running? So, I mean, I say, hey, we're running Covert because, quite frankly, because we think they're the best. But, you know, we appreciate you guys. Appreciate your great customer support.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Lucas. Have a good day.
Bye.